But ultimately, for anybody that's at that point and that wants to take that step, there's fantastic tools out there. There's fantastic, literature, best practices, things of that nature, and that's kind of the heart of, own Bitcoin, rent dollars, is just trying to break that down to give people more of a practical guide on how to do it and why they might want to consider it.
Do you think this is a strategy for like everyone, or is there some situations where you say it's probably not a good idea for someone to do that?
It really depends. Um, And what I would say is that for anybody who's trying to figure out how to accumulate maximum Bitcoin, like if that's the goal, then yeah, they should at least understand this method, understand this process so they can make that decision, right? This is ultimately just equipping people with more education, more information that they can use to make that decision for themselves. But for me personally, I wanted to stack more Bitcoin, but I wasn't going to get another job, and my current job wasn't going to pay me three, four, five, 10 times as much money so that I could buy 10 times more Bitcoin. And so this was inevitably the best path and the best strategy I could come up with that allowed me to maximize my allocation without, again, having to get a second job or ask for, pay increases all the time so that I could further my accumulation.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, if you read, for example, the fiat standard of Cypher, you kind of come to the conclusion you might want to use the fiat to buy more Bitcoin. Of like, okay, Bitcoin is a great solution, and then you wrote the Bitcoin standard, you read the Bitcoin standard of Cypher, and then you go to the fiat standard of Cypher, and you're like, oh, I need to misuse the fiat system to the fullest potential to get as many Bitcoin as possible. Now, it's very hard for me because I purposely decided to just like go the other way around and just like spend my Bitcoin. And this was just more of an emotional and not a financial decision. I just like did not want to have any debts. I just want to be like debt free, and it is very hard because I know how bad the fiat system is. And so I know how good of a decision it is to borrow against your Bitcoin or even get a loan. And I still have a small loan outstanding. I did a small experiment with myself in 2022 where I got a loan for, I think it was 15,000 euros. And I think it was 8 years or something. Like the numbers could be slightly off. I think 8 years, and it was like 3% or 4%. Like it was super low, and I was like, wow. Like, and at that point, I just wanted to try it out and see like what does this actually mean. So I didn't do any borrowing against the Bitcoin, nothing else. It's just like a consumer loan after applying for like 20 loans, and one I got that was really good and favorable. And looking back, this was one of the best decisions I ever took. It was at the bear at the bottom bear market of 2022 and 15,000 euros. I mean, that's just like extremely good from a perspective of how much more money I made with that trade, renting the dollars and like buying the Bitcoin with it over the last 3 years. Like it was like tremendously good. And still, even though my only experience with loans are extremely good and financially good, I I just don't want it. Like it's a weird thing where like emotionally, I no longer want it. And so in hindsight, I just like wish, even though it was a financially good decision, to say like, I wish I'd have never done it. Now, of course, it's a good thing because like I made the experience, I know about it, and like it's nice. And it also has nothing to do with borrowing against your Bitcoin because it was just like a loan. And so that so I struggle in my head because on the one side I really don't like it, but on the other side I know financially it is in most cases. I mean, I don't want to say with every cases, but in most cases, a pretty good financial decision. So I have those two hearts in me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you are thinking about it through the right perspective, right? You're taking a low risk, how do I mitigate risk and protect my Bitcoin first and foremost? And that's how everybody should approach it. And that is one thing you will have to accept and that anybody has to accept when they do post their Bitcoin as collateral. and we talk about that in the book, right? Is which path would you take? Because there's really a couple different paths you can take. You can trust a regulated money services business like the company I work for, which is Salt Lending, or you can work with other lenders, right? There's Ledin, there's Strike, there's Arch, there's, a number of others. And then you've also got decentralized finance, right, which also has some pros and cons. So there are a couple different paths, and each one of those paths has completely different risk vectors, things that you need to learn, best practices, different tools. And that's really at the heart of this whole thing is like, look, don't just dive into this. If you want to explore this as a strategy to accumulate more Bitcoin, there are some best practices. There are some things you can do to protect yourself, but at least have the fundamental understandings of how it works so that you can make an informed decision for yourself. And if you get to that point like you have where it's like, yeah, I understand it, but I'm still not comfortable with it, then you shouldn't do it, right? This is really for people that um, have decided that they want to put their income more into Bitcoin. They want to take loans against it to pay their living expenses and buy their food and pay their rent using borrowed dollars because they want to arbitrage that spread, right? Kind of like what the Bitcoin treasury companies are doing, which is I'm going to raise capital at, Saylor raises capital pretty cheaply and takes that capital and invests it into Bitcoin, which he predicts will return, say, 30% over the next 20 years. And his cost of capital will be more like, 7 to 10 or whatever it is, right? So if he's earning 30 on the asset that he's buying and it's only costing him, say, 7 to 10, well, then there's the spread, right? There's the difference. And so when you apply that to yourself as an individual with a job and you say, well, the savings in my bank account are earning nothing and I'm getting no raises at my employer, yet the cost of living goes up 7 to 10% every single year due to inflation. How can I protect myself? And the answer is you can't, right? You have to get another job or you have to get a raise or you have to, come up with some other magic formula that for a lot of people just doesn't exist. And, that's kind of at the heart of this is just another way that people can at least explore how could I get more access, more allocate more to Bitcoin in a safe, secure, proven way using tools that are safe and proven, etc. And that's kind of at the heart of this, right? Is for the people that make that decision that say, okay, I want to do this, or at least I want to explore it. Own Bitcoin, Rent Dollars is just a great guide, a great sort of TLDR 15-minute read that covers the basics to help people just learn the fundamentals and know where to go to get more information if they truly want to dig in.
And I want to show a chart because it's really interesting, also the risk management of that from the book. It was explained previously, but like, what is kind of this chart showing of the risk level that someone can take within borrowing against your Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you scroll up, if you go to the top of that, let's see. Yeah, the relationship between these two. So if you go to, yep. So this really breaks down the relationship between your income and your expenses, right? So let's say you get $5,000 deposited into your bank account every month for your job, right? That's after taxes. Now let's say that you have to spend 2,500 of that every month on your expenses, right? Your food, your rent, your bills, everything. Well, that means that at the end of every month, you've basically got $2,500 in free flowing cash to invest, to buy Bitcoin, to do whatever it is that you do, right? And so the relationship there between your expenses and your income is relatively modest, right? It's 50%, right? You need 50% of what you make in order to live. And so if you were to implement this strategy, well, in any given month, you would never actually be borrowing more than 50% of what you deposited in Bitcoin, right? Because this strategy says buy Bitcoin with all 5,000 of those dollars and then borrow 2,500 that you need to pay your bills. right? That way you've still got the $2,500 that you need to live your life, but instead of only having $2,500 left to buy Bitcoin, well, you bought $5,000 worth of Bitcoin and still have the $2,500 that you need to pay your bills and live your life. But if you then go to the other example, right, the top example there, right, where your expenses are a significant portion of your income, well, then this strategy is going to be a little bit different for you, and it's going to carry some additional risks where you would probably want to start out with a significant, not a significant, but you'd probably want to start out with an ample amount of Bitcoin as collateral, right? So in this example, I think it says you're what is that? You're borrowing, yeah, you're at 80%, right? So your expenses are 80% of your income, right? And so that's going to put you at a risky level from a loan to value standpoint, which is why in that particular scenario, the individual would probably want to start with some kind of a buffer, say 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 12 months worth of their expenses in the form of Bitcoin as collateral. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is, and so the whole idea is that you buy Bitcoin with all the money that you get in, and then you get basically the amount back each month of what you need for your monthly expenses. So you buy $5,000 of Bitcoin, and because your expenses are like half of that, you are borrowing against that for 50% loan to value, if I understood it correctly.
Exactly. And that's how that would work in that particular example. Yes. The other nuance there though is that depending on which type of lender the individual uses, right, there might be some more rigidity, if you will, in how that works because like the company I work for as an example, you can refinance your loan anytime and it's you don't pay any additional origination fees. It's really easy to get additional cash, right? Whereas with DeFi, right, if you're using, say, Aave or Compound, or you're using like Coinbase's Morpho product or something along those lines, it's a little bit more easy, right? You can just kind of you have liquidity available on demand, so to speak. Whereas with a centralized finance lender or CeFi lender, like the one that I work for, as an example, you just go through the refinance process, fill out sign some additional forms, and then you can get your additional dollars deposited into your account.
Interesting. But
Yeah.
isn't that like the thing is, if you do that every single month, are you not stacking like a lot of debt? Like, isn't then there the problem maybe if there's like a longer bear market? So like if there's something coming your way, I mean, of course, like it has to go down like 50%. But what happens if like Bitcoin goes down like 90% or 80%, even though it is unlikely at this point?
Yeah, and I put a section in here that covers liquidation. I think that's up, let's see. That's on page. Yeah, so starting on page 11, you'll see some of the terminology there about loan to value and margin calls and liquidations. So I think what some people get wrong about liquidations is, let's just take your example, right? Let's say you had $10,000 in Bitcoin that you used as collateral. You took out a $5,000 loan. Now let's say that Bitcoin's price fell by, let's call it 40%. You're now at $6,000 in collateral value. Okay, yeah, you've got the example there, right? So in this example that you're looking at, ultimately all that's happening is the lender is doing a forced liquidation, which does carry a fee, right? But now if you didn't have a loan and your Bitcoin collateral fell by the same percent that you just referenced, well, what's the difference, right? Whether your Bitcoin's being used as collateral or whether it's sitting in your wallet, right? What's the difference? Both of them, in both situations, the value of the Bitcoin has fallen by, let's call it 50%. The only difference is when you're using your Bitcoin as collateral, well, the lender might have to sell some of it to bring your LTV down or sell all of it, right? But either way, the only difference is that if you have a loan, you're going to pay a fee of typically between 2 and 5%. And if you didn't have a loan, well, you wouldn't have to pay that liquidation fee, but your Bitcoin still would have lost the same amount of value due to the volatility. So I think where people confuse liquidation with getting wiped out and losing everything is in these massively levered situations where you've got people taking out 50, 100x leverage. Well, in those situations, yes, if you get liquidated, then the fee that you're going to pay is basically going to consume all of the original capital, all the original assets that you started with. And so that's where I think people conflate, multiple 10, 20, 50x leverage with a simple loan against your Bitcoin at 50% LTV. Those liquidation scenarios and the resulting impacts from those are completely different.
So basically making sure that even if Bitcoin drops 80, 90%, that you're still okay, like making the calculations of like what happens actually if Bitcoin drops drastically, and then still having enough Bitcoin to post as collateral, enough buffer, like enough a security zone that you're like, okay, even if that happens, I'm still okay. I mean, that's also what Saylor often mentioned, that make sure you're still fine, even if Bitcoin drops like 90%. I think I heard him saying that multiple times, which is, I think in general, like very good advice, especially if you use any form of borrowing against your Bitcoin. I mean, if you have a loan that is not against your Bitcoin, then like you don't care how much Bitcoin falls. You just have to make sure you can service the loan and don't run out of cash. If you don't do anything with debt, then like it doesn't matter at all, because like then it's just like Bitcoin that falls, and you only lose if you sell them, which you might also be forced to if you lose a job in a bear market or anything like that. Which is interesting, yeah, because like then if you always have the safety margins, like if always have the safety zones of even if Bitcoin drops 80, 90%, which I again don't believe it happens, but it might, and so you should better prepared for it than not being prepared for it, and it doesn't happen, and it does happen. The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called micro seed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With micro seed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups, because MicroSeed is not selling the washer. MicroSeed is selling the device that stamps the washer. You get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.